Studio Classroom is on the air.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Studio Classroom on the air. My name is Carolyn. Earthquakes can be very scary, but they can also happen often in certain parts of the world. In fact, there are hundreds of small earthquakes that happen around the world every day. So our lesson today is called, Why is the Ground Shaking? With earthquakes being so common, we should try to understand more about them. Have you ever experienced an earthquake? What was it like? Talk about that in English after today's lesson.
Why is the ground shaking? The truth about earthquakes. In an average year, hundreds of small earthquakes happen around the world every day. Major earthquakes occur on average more than once a month. That may not seem like much, but considering the severe effects of earthquakes, once a month is more than enough. Natural disasters like earthquakes affect certain areas more than others. The Earth's crust is arranged in plates. When those plates shift, earthquakes take place. Areas along fault lines have the most earthquakes. Can an earthquake be predicted? Instruments called seismographs measure the strength of an earthquake as well as its location.
Hi everyone, welcome to Language Lab. 今天的第一个重点，我们看 severe 这个形容词。Severe 是指严重的或者是剧烈的。例如 the typhoon caused severe damage to this island. 这个台风对这个岛屿造成了严重的损害。或者是 severe chest pain may be a sign of heart problems. 严重的胸痛可能是心脏有问题的征兆。Severe 也指严峻的或者是极度困难的，例如 the penalty for drunk driving is severe， 酒驾的处罚是非常严重的。它的名词是 severity， S-E-V-E-R-I-T-Y， 例如 most of the staff didn't know the severity of the company's financial problems until its bankruptcy was announced。大多数员工直到公司宣布破产前都不晓得公司财务问题有多严重。继续我们看的是 disaster 这个名词。Disaster 是指灾难或不幸，例如 many people lost their loved ones in the disaster。这场灾难中，许多人都失去挚爱。Disaster 也可以放在另外一个名词前面当补语，例如 The day after tomorrow is one of my favorite disaster movies。明天过后是我最喜欢的灾难电影之一。Disaster 也可以指极为糟糕或凄惨的事，例如 The outdoor party was a disaster because of a sudden rainstorm。因为突然来了场暴雨，搞得这场户外派对一片凄惨。它的形容词是 disastrous， D-I-S-A-S-T-R-O-U-S。例如 A disastrous flood ruined the whole town。洪灾摧毁了整个城镇。
Thank you so much, Michelle. Well, our article today is very exciting. Why is the ground shaking? We're talking all about earthquakes today, and we read here that we're going to learn the truth about earthquakes. Maybe there are some things you didn't realize about earthquakes that we'll talk about in our lesson today.
That's right, the truth about earthquakes, so you can count on learning the facts about earthquakes, what really happens with the ground in an earthquake.
Well, we read that in an average year, hundreds of small earthquakes happen around the world every day. That's a lot of earthquakes.
Yeah, and it's something I don't usually think about because we don't feel most of them. Even in countries that often have earthquakes, there are often smaller ones happening that most people just don't feel, right? But I like that word average here, talking about time. So an average year, hundreds of small earthquakes happen around the world every day.
Sure. And here the word average just means normal or usual. It's an average year means that it's not unusual.
And so we could use this word to talk about other periods of time, right? In an average week, in an average month, this happens. For another example, on an average day, Americans walk between 5,000 to 7,000 steps. Now, that's something that I read. On an average day, Americans walk that much. It made me think, living here in Taipei, where I would assume that people walk even more than that, but I'm not sure.
Well, I walk about, let's see, 8,000 to 10,000 steps on an average day.
See, you do. That's amazing. So it makes me think a lot of other people do as well because they're not driving all over the place like they do in America.
Sure, we do walk a lot more here in the city to get from one place to another. It's very nice. So in an average year, there are hundreds of small earthquakes happening around the world, and major earthquakes occur on average more than once a month.
So we see that word average here again, and it's coupled with the word on. That's another way we use this word average, okay? Most earthquakes occur on average more than once a month. On average, Americans walk between 5,000 and 7,000 steps. And we continue here, that may not seem like much for earthquakes, but considering the severe effects of earthquakes, once a month is more than enough.
That is so true. And I like the way this sentence starts. That may not seem like much. We use this to express that while something may seem small or not important, that actually it is important.
Exactly. It may not seem like much, but let me tell you some interesting facts that might change your mind, okay? For another example of how to use that phrase, a lot of people like coffee. 1 cup of coffee only costs 50 NT. That may not seem like much, but it makes a difference over time, especially when you have 2 cups of coffee every day like me. That's 37,500 NT every year. That's a lot.
That is a lot. So it may not seem like much, but it adds up.
Yes, that's a great phrase. It adds up.
So it adds up. And these earthquakes, it may not seem like much if there's only one big one per month, but they are very destructive. So actually, it's more than enough.
Way more than enough. Well, an earthquake is a kind of natural disaster. Those are the words that begin this next sentence. Natural disasters, like earthquakes, affect certain areas more than others.
Now, I want to look at that word a moment, natural disaster. This is a type of natural occurrence, some kind of storm or event that usually causes destruction, like an earthquake, but there are a lot of other kinds of natural disasters.
Right, a volcano erupting is a natural disaster, right? Of course, you can see here we are learning about earthquakes, and earthquakes are because of certain fault lines on the earth, okay? Areas along fault lines have the most earthquakes. Now we read here, can an earthquake be predicted? Instruments called seismographs measure the strength of an earthquake as well as its location.
Ah, that is an interesting thing to know. The size of an earthquake, the strength of it. Well, we can learn about the Richter scale and how that's measured in the Info Cloud.
Welcome to InfoCloud. Today we are going to mix language with geology and talk about the way earthquakes are measured.
When you hear reports about earthquakes on the news, they will often be described as a magnitude number, point number quake on the Richter scale.
Or simply, yesterday there was a magnitude 5.3 quake off the coast of Japan.
So there are a few things to note here. First, magnitude means the measurement of the amount of energy released.
The energy is measured on a scale that is named after one of the scientists responsible for developing it, Charles F. Richter.
It is a logarithmic scale, Without getting too much into the math and physics behind the scale, each point on the scale is 10 times bigger than the one before it.
So a 5.0 earthquake is 10 times as big as a 4.0 earthquake. There are actually many different qualities of an earthquake that can be measured.
But when we are talking about the magnitude of an earthquake, we are talking about the overall strength of an earthquake.
There are actually a number of scales used to measure an earthquake, but they are usually reported as measuring a number of points on the Richter scale.
Earthquakes less than 3.0 on the scale are usually not felt. Quakes from 5.0 to 5.9 can cause damage to weak buildings. Anything above 6.0 becomes very dangerous. 7.0 and above is devastating.
在亚洲的许多地方经常会发生地震。今天来学习一个跟地震有关的用语 Richter scale 瑞士规模。如果你是居住在地震发生频繁的地区，相信对瑞士规模不会太陌生。The earthquake measured 5.0 on the Richter scale， 意思就是这次的地震在瑞士规模上测量是 5.0。值得注意的是 ，Richter scale 上面测量的每多一分的刻度都是10倍的强度。也就是说 ，5.0 的规模的地震比 4.0 的强度多出10倍。这样的地震测量法是由美国地震学家 Charles F. Richter 瑞克特所发展出来的，所以才会叫做瑞士规模。这就是今天的 Info Cloud， 我们下次云端见。
Studio Classroom is on the air.
Welcome back to Studio Classroom. Our lesson today is all about earthquakes. Have you ever experienced an earthquake? They can be quite scary. And earthquakes are common all around the world. They happen almost every day. But can an earthquake be predicted? And what can you do if an earthquake strikes near you? We'll find out more about that in the next part of our lesson.
Why is the ground shaking? However, these machines can't predict when an earthquake will happen. Scientists have been trying to determine methods of figuring this out for some time, but without success. Lend a helping hand. Earthquakes can happen anywhere in the world and can affect anyone. There are some things that people can do to reduce the amount of damage left by earthquakes. It's our job to help out our neighbors and lend a hand when we can. This year, it may be a neighboring country, and next year, it may be on our doorstep. We should all look for ways to help out when disaster strikes.
OK， 接下来我们看的是 predict 这个动词 ，pre 这个字首有提前的意思 ，dic 这个字根有宣称的意思，所以 predict 是指预测、预先警示或者是预告。例如 ，the weather forecast predicted that a severe hurricane will hit the East Coast next week。气象预报预告下周会有强烈飓风侵袭东岸。或者是 a recession is predicted to occur soon by this famous economist。这位知名的经济学家预测很快会发生经济不景气，它的名词是字尾加上 ion 变成 prediction。例如 ，Luckily, the prediction about another wave of massive layoffs never came true。还好，另外一波大量裁员的预测并没有成真。最后我们看的是 doorstep 这个名词 ，doorstep 原本是指门前的台阶。例如 ，Ricky picked up the parcel on the doorstep and brought it to his father。Ricky 把台阶上的邮包捡起来拿去给爸爸。或者是 Just 15 minutes after I ordered the food, The delivery guy showed up on my doorstep. 我才点餐15分钟后，外送员就出现在我家门口的台阶。课文中的 on one's doorstep 的意思是指很接近，或者是近在咫尺。例如 ，A beautiful park is right on our doorstep. 我家附近就有一座美丽的公园。And now let's get back to our teachers.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Well, let's continue learning the truth about earthquakes. We read here that these machines, these are the seismograph machines, can't predict when an earthquake will happen. So they can tell us how strong the earthquake is, but they can't tell us when it's going to happen. And scientists have been trying to determine methods of figuring this out for some time, but without success, which is unfortunate because being able to predict earthquakes would be very helpful.
Yeah, I know that scientists can't predict when an earthquake will happen, but I've heard that there are some animals that we can observe in nature that kind of tell us when something like this might happen. Like frogs, for example, when they come out of their usual place and they start scurrying all over the place. I've heard that that's a way where people could tell, hey, there might be an earthquake coming soon.
Ah, that's an interesting way to try to predict them by watching animal behavior.
Yeah.
But seismographs can't tell us when they will happen, and the scientists have been trying to figure out for some time how to predict earthquakes. And I want to look at that phrase, for some time. This just means for a period of time, but often we use it to mean a long period of time.
You're right about that. Okay, so it's not a certain amount of time, like 3 hours and 5 minutes. No, you're not giving a certain amount of time. You're not specific, but it's definitely not a small amount of time. So I could say something like, I've been considering going back to school for some time. If I said that, then you know that I've been thinking about this for a while now.
Right, so maybe you've been thinking about it for a few months, maybe even a few years. But it's for some time, so for a length of time. But the scientists have not been successful in finding a way to really predict earthquakes, maybe more than a few seconds before they happen.
Yeah, I know, and I'm really glad they're trying to work on it. Jayo, you guys. Well, let's continue here. We can do something after an earthquake happens, for sure. We might not be able to predict an earthquake, but we see here that we can lend a helping hand.
That's right, and I really like this idea. To lend a helping hand means that you help someone for a short time. So it's kind of like they're borrowing your assistance. You lend a helping hand to them.
That's right. It's a great phrase to know, and sometimes we simply say, lend a hand without using the word helping, right? Can you lend a hand? Or lend me a hand. That means I'm asking for your help. Now, the past tense of that word lend could be lended or lent. Okay, so they lended a helping hand or they lent a helping hand.
Now, this may not actually involve your hands. It might mean they need your help thinking of an idea. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical in nature.
Exactly. Great point.
But you can lend a helping hand to those who have been through an earthquake. We read that earthquakes can happen anywhere in the world and affect anyone. There are some things that people can do to reduce the amount of damage left by an earthquake.
Yes, that is exactly right. Sometimes we call that relief effort, okay? Because especially after a big earthquake has collapsed many buildings, a lot of people are hurt. You can go and help and give some relief, okay? Just like the person or the people in this picture, someone has been hurt in an earthquake or something, and they're there to lend a helping hand.
And that's really great to be able to use their skills as rescuers, perhaps medical professionals, to help this person who was injured. And we read here that it's our job to help our neighbors and lend a hand when we can. Now let's look at the beginning of that sentence there. It's our job to. Now, this doesn't mean that it's actually our job, that we get paid to do this. It just means that it's our responsibility to help people around us.
That's a great point. It's our responsibility, it's our duty to do this. I would say it's our job to love our neighbor, right? And one way you can love your neighbor is by helping after a big disaster like this. It's our job to help out our neighbors and lend a hand when we can. This year it may be a neighboring country, and next year it might be on our doorstep. So that the idea is you might have to leave your country to a neighboring one close by, if there is an earthquake that happened there.
Sure, and if maybe there's an earthquake in your area and people you know lose their home, you could let them live with you for a short period of time until they find another home.
And we read here, we should all look for ways to help out when disaster strikes. Okay, that's a great reminder, but right now it is time for us to close our lesson with
a review skit.
Excuse me, Professor Jones. Can we talk?
Oh, well, sure. What's going on? You seem nervous.
Oh, I am nervous. I'm supposed to go to Japan very soon.
Oh, well, wonderful. There's a lot to see in Japan.
I know, but there have been so many natural disasters there recently.
Well, there are natural disasters everywhere.
Well, that's true, but it just makes me nervous, especially earthquakes.
Oh, calm down. Earthquakes happen more often than you think. A lot of time, they're so small that you probably don't even feel them.
Well, what about the crazy big earthquakes? Oh, those cause severe problems.
Well, yes, but you may not come across one.
Well, but how do you know? Can anyone predict earthquakes?
Well, no. No one and no machine can truly predict earthquakes. What I really mean is that you should still go to Japan and enjoy your time.
But how can I enjoy my time? What if there's an earthquake there?
Well, what if there's an earthquake here? It could happen on your own doorstep.
Oh, well, I never thought about that before.
Just go ahead, be prepared, but don't worry about it.
Yeah, you're right. I guess an earthquake can happen anytime and anywhere. So
Yeah.
what? What's that? Whoa, why is the ground shaking?
Oh, dear.
I guess it's an earthquake.
Oh, nature has a funny way of showing itself, doesn't it?
It does.
Friends, earthquakes can be scary, but I hope that today's lesson has given you a little more information about these natural disasters. Are you close to a fault line? Do you experience earthquakes often? If so, maybe you can lend a helping hand to people who have suffered from this natural disaster. I hope that you are helpful to those around you, and we look forward to seeing you next time here on Studio Classroom.
A friend endures at all times. A good friend lasts a lifetime. I am so proud to have you in my life. A good friend lasts a lifetime.